Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of The Learning Curve with Ramya Deepak. It has been an exciting few weeks as I pleasantly enjoyed the response to the first episode, which I posted a few weeks back on International Women's Day. The topic of women in educational leadership seems to have resonated with you, and many of you reached out to share your perspectives, and it was such an interesting conversation that I ended up having with so many of you. The second episode today is actually an offshoot of one such interaction I had with my today's guest. I'm honored to introduce and welcome Deborah Grosick to our studio today. Deborah is an experienced school principal and deputy president of the Victorian Principals Association. After beginning her teaching career as a secondary science teacher in the UK, she has been leading public schools in Victoria for the past 22 years. Deborah also holds Master of Educational Leadership from the University of Melbourne, which encompassed the research on the role of the principal, leadership versus management. An icon, a legend, promoting women in leadership is Deborah's passion, and that's why it's my honor to have her here today. Deborah, firstly, thank you for joining us, and thank you for reaching out via your comments and highlighting the need for more discussion on this topic, which is women in educational leadership. Let us start by just understanding your journey a little bit better. And so what motivated you to pursue a leadership role in education?
Firstly, I had a great passion for teaching. Having taught science for a long time, I wanted to focus on teaching children and going a little broader than just delivering a standardized curriculum. I always wanted to teach in a way that interested, empowered and engaged students. So on emigrating to Australia in early 1988, I then sort of retrained, did another degree through Deakin University to enable me to be a capable primary school teacher. And I sort of grew from wanting what I was doing in my classroom to wanting everybody to do in their classrooms in terms of extending and empowering students with their learning. So I had a very clear and passionate view about teaching, and I wanted I guess everybody to teach like that. I felt that I could have another teacher to sit in my classroom and do what I was doing, and I could have influence on a broader scale. So it was more about influencing on a bigger scale, and I'm sort of doing that now with the VPA in influencing in a broader way than my school. So
so in a way you have gone from influencing your own students and then more students by mentoring and supporting teachers, but now with your role in VPA, you're mentoring and supporting principals. So your influence has increased that way.
Yes, I like to take the system-wide view. I have a lovely school here with a lovely culture, and I guess I would then like to see more schools be like that. I'm very passionate about education, sort of per se.
Absolutely, Deborah. So coming back to today's topic then, what are some of the, in your opinion, some of the mental and emotional challenges that women face in school leadership? And do you have any personal experiences in that regard? And how do you personally cope with them when you come across the challenges?
Well, I think personally, when I started teaching in about 1975, women weren't allowed to wear trousers to school. I found that's a little difficult to grapple with, and we've come a long way from there. I think that the challenges for women can be the same as the challenges for men, in that you are juggling a family. I think more so women have the traditional role of the responsibility in the first place with the family, and of course you're always torn between being called away from school because one of your children is sick, and I think it's more likely that the woman is taking on that role and that responsibility. I do see some of my male teachers play a big part in their families, and I do see things changing with them taking on family responsibilities as well. I think we're moving a bit further from there, but that certainly is a challenge. I sort of delayed my career for about 10 years because I wanted to focus more on my children, and I think women are often the ones who maybe slow down or sacrifice their career for the family more so than men. That's often a stereotypical view that men are the breadwinners, but also men often earn more than women.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that work-life balance and that that responsibility of that more caretaking responsibility traditionally have has fallen more on the shoulders of women, and I think that does present some challenges when we want to juggle a career and jump into leadership as well, and then have to take care of home as well. So again, I guess that comes from having those gender stereotypes, isn't it? It's big, having those gender stereotypes and that expectations that creates this inequity for women in leadership positions. Any thoughts on that, Deborah?
Yes, I think that part-time
Yeah.
is also a challenge in leadership. I'm
Mm.
on the government statewide gender equity reference group, and we had a meeting today, and we were talking about that. And in some ways, the dreadful teacher shortage that we have at the moment
Yes.
is playing more into the hands of women because principals are now much more likely to take on part-time teachers if the option is no teachers.
Yeah.
It is hard being part-time because you do have to juggle a role. We
Mm.
discussed the role of the principal being shared even, but there's so much that you
Yeah.
carry in your head and you carry from day to day. The same with teaching, that it's very hard to have that overlap time where you explain everything. It is a challenge, but I think more opportunities for women are certainly opening up
Mm-hmm.
now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's hard in terms of leadership, but I'm very aware of being a female leader, that
Mm-hmm.
I understand the women who are coming up through leadership in my school in particular, and I can guide or I can mentor and I can
Yeah.
sort of adjust the workplace experience for them.
Yeah. Absolutely. What are some of the like? How can we kind of some address some of those gender stereotypes in our educational system and in the workplace system in our education?
It's hard and it takes time.
Mm.
And I think that companies and the education department have to have proactive
Mm.
policies
Mm.
to assist women. Women can be their own
Mm.
worst enemy because they
Yeah.
think they need to be 110%
Mm.
competent. They think they need to have done every job that an
Yeah.
assistant principal will possibly do before they can take on the role.
Yeah.
Men don't feel that at all. Men will jump in with a little
Mm.
bit of experience and the attitude
Mm.
of I'll just have a go. I
Mm.
don't know very many women
Mm.
that do that.
Mm.
I've mentored women who said, "Look, I'm an assistant principal, but I've just done this part. Do you think I should go to another school and be an
Mm.
assistant principal there and do well-being and then do
Mm.
this before I apply?" And I went,
Mm.
"No, absolutely not. You learn as you go."
Yeah.
So
I've
I
had
think we
those thoughts myself. Yeah, I know.
Yes, well, no, you don't. Jump in and have a go. And I
Yeah.
think women's networks are immensely important, and we don't have enough of them. Men have their own networks, men support each other.
Yeah.
And when we sort of challenged a group of men and said, look, you've got your boys club, you support boys, what about women? They said, well, why don't you women do the same as
You
what we're
saw.
doing? Why don't you have support group? Why don't you have your network? And it would be nice to set up a network in our region so that women can meet. There's a very good network in the Geelong or the Bowen area where they have worked over the last few years to run PD, to run network meetings, to just be mentors to each other and encourage
Yeah.
women, and they're having an enormous amount
Yeah.
of success.
Yeah, that is
Interestingly,
definitely the value of a network, and having those conversations in a network is really immeasurable. Absolutely.
that's right.
Yeah. So in addition to this gender stereotypes and the challenges that come very naturally, are there any other implicit bias that you have come across as women leader in education?
Against women, a bias
Yeah.
against women.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
well, I know of a friend of mine who, when she went to apply for the assistant principal job at her school, her male principal said, "I want a man."
Mm.
I mean, it wasn't very implicit. It was
Yeah.
quite
It was quite, yeah.
explicit. And
Yeah.
I think that sometimes, questioning, of course, we have, equity in merit and equity in
Yeah.
terms but in terms of appointments, but you see that in the community and you see that in tradespeople that come to the school. I have a male assistant principal. We sort of a similar age. He's taller than me. They just assume that he's the
He's,
principal. They just make that assumption, and I've had to learn how to talk with tradespeople. I learned what a spoon drain was. I had to learn a few things to be and watch the way that men operate and try to make it plain that they would see me as the principal.
yeah. Yeah,
So I think
that's
that's
the
the sort of thing.
credibility bias, isn't it? That's the credibility or the competence bias that people think that men are more competent than women in certain areas, or as leaders, definitely they think men make better leaders than women.
And I
And
think that men are better at disciplining children. So
yeah,
therefore, I
exactly.
see them as a
Yeah.
principal. And last year, I spent quite a deal of time visiting 5 of prep grades because when I went in to see them at the beginning of the year and was introduced, and the teacher said, "This is the principal," they went, "No, Mr. So-and-so, he's the principal." And I went, "No, he's not." And I was astounded that they hadn't been told this. 5-year-old children had made an assumption that because
Yeah.
he was the man. So I
Yeah.
spent a lot of time visiting prep grades telling them that I was the boss of the whole school. And some of them just refused to believe me.
Absolutely. And I think that's what you were saying in terms of discipline is that people assume that maternal bias for women, they think that because they are more nurturing and caring, so they cannot be disciplinarians, or that they will prioritize emotional well-being over academic achievement, or, those kind of things. Have you experienced that as well?
Um, yes, I think so. And I think I have daughters, and I think, my daughters have too. But it's a feeling, but you also have a feeling yourself of
Yeah.
intimidation, even though you're not being
Yeah.
physically intimidated.
Yeah.
Um, One of my daughters, for example, works for one of the big water companies, and in that they have uh, great gender equity policies. They're wonderful in the way that they develop women. The workers in the field and the leaders in the field and the managers, they are all engineers and they're technical people. They work in the STEM field. And so when she meets with them, she can be the only woman in the room and she's a young woman. And just the feeling that, and there's a lot of the engineers are older men, and in that they do nothing to make her feel intimidated as the only woman, she has that feeling
Yeah.
of intimidation, and
Yeah.
in that we are getting more women going into the trades. They haven't got up to the management level. They're not the field
Yeah.
managers in those
Yeah.
trades. They're still
Absolutely.
men.
Yeah.
So I think we ourselves need to be stronger and we need to support each other and
Yeah.
we need to get rid of these sort of imposter syndrome
Yeah.
beliefs.
Yeah.
I sort of felt like an imposter when I first became a leader because I felt like a fraud. I felt like I wasn't good enough. I got there by accident or because somebody liked me. That self-belief in your own leadership skills, which I think comes maybe more naturally to men,
Yeah.
doesn't come as naturally to women.
Yeah, I read a study somewhere where they said even when we are applying, and in our educational department, we apply through responding to the key selection criteria. When women draft their responses, they doubt themselves so much, like they think about, should I actually put that? And does that actually mean that I have done this? I have achieved this key selection criteria, all of that. Whereas men are more confident and they are able to more, pick anecdotes much more easily to say, no, yes, I have done this. And that actually is related to this and things like
That's
that.
right.
Yeah.
And I think we can help each other. I was lucky. I had people who helped me, who supported me, promoted me, women and men.
Yeah.
So that was
Yeah,
good.
so we've already touched on some of the actions we can take in terms of, the network, building the network and believing in ourselves, but also believing in our colleagues, our women colleagues and stuff like that. But in terms of what can, as a system, as a school, one as a school and then one as a bigger system, what are some of the actions do you think or steps we can take to promote a more inclusive culture that actually promotes women's leadership development?
I think it's about trust. I think a lot of leadership is about trust and empowering your staff. And I trust my staff. I know the staff that are racing out of school at 4 o'clock mainly have young children, and I
Yeah.
trust and know that they don't have to be here to show that they're working. They go home. And that's what I used to do. I used to start work at 9 o'clock, and I think we have to trust that the staff are all professionals, and
Yeah.
regardless of family responsibilities, they are going to do the work that's necessary in the
Yeah.
school. And so I think as a school, there's that understanding that the child is sick and the teacher has to dash home, and that's it. You're not making judgments about that. You're not penalising them. You're making them feel comfortable in the way that you relate and support them. And I talk about myself as a parent, and I understand where I was. I was a single parent for quite some time, and that was quite challenging in terms of maybe perceptions of other people. It was also challenging in undertaking professional leadership courses because some of the courses, well, in those days, it was a while ago,
Yeah.
included a residential weekend. Well, there is
Absolutely.
no way a single parent or
Yeah.
any gender can attend that sort of thing. I think that there's a much greater understanding
Yeah.
now in the
Yes.
department. You certainly see, if you sort of Google women in leadership, you see that the Minister for Education is promoting women of colour in leadership. They're promoting a lot of leadership initiatives. We have a Minister for Women, Federal Minister for Women. I think there's a real momentum being started, and there's a lot, I think, that is actually being done. I'd like to see more affordable women in leadership courses,
Yeah.
because they are the ones I've looked at are several $1,000s, and only the big and more wealthy schools can afford to send women on those. So I would say sometimes it's the timing. Maybe some courses can be online, so they're family friendly, which would suit men as well, and they could be more subsidized and not so expensive.
Yep. And at a school level, Deborah, I mean, if we come across as leaders, as young teachers who are considering stepping into that leadership, or what advice do you have for them, and what would you say to those young women teachers?
Well, I would say have a go. I
Yeah.
would say look at what you're interested in and look at what you are good at and where you can make a difference.
Yep.
So work to your strengths, find yourself a mentor, find yourself a group that you can work with. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's like with girls. They like to work with somebody else. They like to have a partner to work with. And I think women are the same. They like to work with a group. They like to work
Absolutely.
with a trusted friend that can help them on their journey. And find yourself a network or start a network.
Yeah.
I think it's about mentoring network and people who can help you develop that confidence. It's hard to say be more confident, but that in effect is what I'm saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Deborah. Oh my gosh, it has been such an insightful conversation we have had today. Especially, I mean, we have covered the challenges women face, we have covered stereotypes and biases, but we also looked at some of the actions we can take to address. And I would like to thank you for your valuable inputs. Before we wrap up, is there any closing comments that you wanted to add to today's discussion?
I would just like to encourage women who are watching to believe in themselves. Write down all the things that you think you can do, and you'll find that the list is longer. And I think
Yes.
that often the things that we do whilst we are developing our own children and not necessarily working, full time, there's a lot of transferable skills. There's a lot of things
Absolutely.
that you can do out there.
Yeah.
I always had to be organising something, so I organised a preschool 3-year-old childcare group. I organised a babysitting group. There's
Yeah.
things that you can do that are transferable.
Yeah,
There
absolutely.
are lots of things that are not necessarily specifically school related, but will help you develop in terms of leadership.
I think you may have just given me the topic for my next discussion, and I may have to find a speaker on that. That's something for me to do. But you're absolutely right, and I think there is so much we can do in this space, and I think it starts with us. It starts with us. It starts with us believing in ourselves, but then it starts with us building the capacity and building the confidence of our colleagues, and building that network. So thank you once again, Deborah. It is also evident from our discussion that progress has been made, and compared to where we were a few years ago or many years ago, lots of progress has been made, but there's still much work to be done. So thank you so much for your time and contribution today. And we hope, last time I closed with the quote from Sheryl Sandberg, that hopefully there will be a time soon where we won't say male and female leaders, we will just say leaders. So I think that's what we are hoping for. So thank you, Deborah. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.